The screening committee appointed by the Lowell School Committee to help select a new school superintendent began its work tonight by interviewing two candidates. The interviews took place at the Lowell High School Little Theater. They were videotaped by the staff from Lowell Educational TV Channel 22, but they won't be shown on local cable until all of the interviews are completed. All 7 members of the school committee were in attendance tonight. The screening committee consists of 13 people, and you've heard a lot about them. You've read about them, about the various controversies and whether or not they were representative enough of the community, particularly the minority community. But here's a chance for you to actually see the members. They are Dawn Pearson from UMass Lowell, Molly Sheehy from Middlesex Community College, Paul Georges of the United Teachers of Lowell, Jean Osborne from the Chamber of Commerce, Jim Cook from the Lowell Plan, Teresa Kalena from the Citywide Parent Council, and Anita Downs, also from the Citywide Parent Council. Next we have Eileen Donahue, former mayor, who is the chair of the committee. However, she is a non-voting member. Then there's Ted Rorak, a former deputy superintendent of the Lowell Public Schools. Kathleen McLaughlin, an elementary school teacher and also a member of the United Teachers of Lowell. Linda Lee, the superintendent of the Shaughnessy School in Lowell. Karen Frederick, the director of community teamwork. Cindy McAndrews, a representative from the Special Education Parents Advisory Council. And Carla Correa Berg, a social worker in the Lowell Public Schools. The way the evening was organized, each member of the committee asked a question, and the candidate had 5 minutes to answer each of the questions, and then a 5-minute closing statement. First person interviewed tonight was Paul Schlickman, who is employed by the Lowell school system right now as the Director of Assessment. Just some of the highlights of Paul's interview. He said that we've got to sell our schools. He said that he said about 25% of the kids in the Lowell schools are what he called suburban kids. They're based on their demographics, their family income, that sort of thing. And he said that when you compare the achievement of those kids to those in other suburban districts, that pool of Lowell students does better than their counterparts in the suburbs. And that's something he says that we have to use to sell the Lowell school system to people moving into the community. Plus those students have the additional benefit of going to school in a much more diverse community. He said that we have to make sure every student achieves the top level of attainment by the time they graduate, but that some get there quicker than others. He also very emphatically stated that no matter who the school committee selects as a superintendent, he said we don't need a turnaround artist. We're on the right track. We now need to sell the community to convince the people that their investment in the schools is paying off. He said that we can go to the next level and take advantage of all the hard work that's been done over the past 6 years. So here's a small clip of Paul Schlickman so that you can get a sense of how he presents himself.
Shaming myself, but an effective school is one that's energized by learning when the children are in the room. You can feel that energy and real learning is going on. If you walk through classrooms, you can see that learning, you can feel that learning, you can feel that excitement in the room, you can feel children want to be there. You can talk to children and ask them what's happening in their classroom, and they will describe the learning they're doing. They'll be able to reflect on what's happening.
The second person interviewed tonight was Chris Augusta Scott, who is currently the superintendent in the Massachusetts community of Norfolk. She has previously worked in her native Halifax, Nova Scotia, and in Cambridge, Massachusetts in a variety of positions. She's also an applicant for the job of superintendent of the New Bedford Public Schools. That was something that was, I think, reported in the newspaper over the weekend. But interestingly enough, there was a reporter from the New Bedford Standard Times there tonight to cover her interview. Dr. Scott was certainly very different than Mr. Schlickman. I thought, two of the high points of her interview were her budgetary experience. She said that within 8 weeks of arriving in Norfolk, she let her business manager for the school system go, and she took over control of the budget and funds. And she said by the person in charge of the system also being in charge of the money, that she was much better able to synchronize the expenditure of funds with the goals of the school system. So that 2 years ago, that their budget, the school system's budget, increased by only slightly over 2%, and this year it increased by only 0.5%, and in both years they added additional services. Another thing that I thought Dr. Scott made pretty clear was that she has what you might call a corporate or a business mentality when it comes to the schools. That in a couple of examples she used of making pretty significant cuts in school personnel to better organize the delivery of services. For example, she talked about how her analysis showed that the district had 19 special education aides, and that she concluded that the services to the children in need of special ed could be much better delivered by a lesser number of professionals, by teachers. And so she replaced the 19 aides with a lesser number of teachers. And she talked about how she managed that transition and met with the parents in advance of the official announcement to address their fears and their concerns. And she presented it as a very positive thing, which I'm sure it came out that way, except for maybe the 19 people who were replaced. But I think that's the kind of hard choices that people in education have to make in a time of tighter budgets. But overall tonight, both Mr. Schlickman and Dr. Scott gave very good interviews. It was very interesting, and I look forward to seeing the remainder of the interviews. We'll close out with a short clip of Dr. Chris Augusta Scott, who was the second person to be interviewed tonight.
Thank you for the question. I've really had a wonderful opportunity to work with parents, if it's been Halifax or Cambridge or Norfolk, because as we know, a hallmark sign of the district's success is how involved parents are with their children's education. And I really think it's our responsibility to build the bridge, to make the connect, to make the phone call to parents when everything's going well with their children.